Certainly.
Here's section 1 of the story. They sent armies. We sent one human, with a minimum of 700 words. Hashtag section 1. The Declaration of War. In the 75th cycle of the Galactic Order, a fragile peace bound over 400 intelligent species. War was no longer fought in flames and chaos, but in sanctioned arenas, controlled, observed, and contained. Technology had long outpaced the brutality of the blade, and so conflict became ceremonial, waged with calculated force under the watchful eye of bureaucrats and ancient treaties. Still, despite all the regulation, all the diplomacy, the old instincts never truly faded. Humanity had only been a member of the Order for 8 standard years. Young, chaotic, barely removed from their own global conflicts when first contacted, but ambitious, tenacious, dangerous in ways that the Order did not yet fully understand. The elder races had scoffed when Earth was accepted, claiming they had earned their seat not by strength, but by pity. Yet Earth had played its part wisely, offering mining rights, trade concessions, and cultural appeasement. They had stayed silent, watching, listening. And when the planet Arcanes 4 became a disputed asset, humanity made its move. Arcanes 4 wasn't just any planet. It was rich in neodymium, a rare and volatile mineral essential for interstellar reactor cores. Technically unclaimed, the planet had remained neutral until it was provisionally awarded to Earth's colony division by the Order. The decision was procedural. Humans had charted and surveyed the world first. But the Tarsari Dominion took it as an insult. The Tarsari were one of the oldest military empires in the quadrant. Massive, insectoid beings, born into a caste of war.
Honor-bound. Proud.
To them, humans were soft-bodied upstarts who had only recently crawled from their gravity well. The idea that such a species would receive a planet they had coveted for generations was not just unacceptable, it was blasphemous. Within days of the Council's decision, the Tarsari delivered their intent to challenge Earth's claim. Per Galactic Conflict Protocol 3-9, a limited force engagement would settle the matter. The terms were clear. Both sides were allowed to deploy military forces under a fixed power threshold, no planet-cracking weapons, no orbital megastructures.
Boots on the ground.
Commanders in the field. A show of strength. The Tarsari wasted no time. They assembled a combat force of 50,000 warriors, supported by hunter-killer droids and a fully armed battlecruiser to serve as command and logistics. This was not merely a show of force, it was a message. They would crush the humans, not with brute destruction, but with the disciplined, efficient humiliation of a superior army. Their leader, High Marshal Srajek, famously declared, "Let them send whatever they can. We will bury them beneath our boots and return their flag wrapped around our blades." The Order convened a special session to finalize the engagement terms. All eyes turned to Earth's ambassador, a quiet, bespectacled woman named Amina Cho. When asked what Earth would send in return, she stood, cleared her throat, and delivered a response that echoed across every network in the galaxy. "We will send one." Laughter erupted across the chamber. Even the stoic Zathari representatives allowed themselves a flicker of amusement.
Fun?
Surely, it was a jest. A form of protest. A delay tactic. But Amina Cho's face remained unreadable. "Please clarify," intoned Counselor Veklo of the Vraxi Syndicate. "Do you mean one ship? One detachment? One battalion? One human?" she said calmly. Commander Elias Ron. Silence followed. Then murmurs. Then outrage. "This violates the spirit of conflict engagement," hissed the Tarsari envoy. "It adheres to the letter of it," Cho replied. "The power threshold allows it. We have reviewed the limits carefully. Our single combatant falls well below the maximum limit. You insult us."
No.
"We honor the system. You sent armies. We send one human." The Order deliberated. Rules were rules. The engagement was scheduled for a remote quadrant of Arcanes 4, neutral ground, surveyed by unarmed orbital drones. Live feeds would be transmitted to ensure transparency. A 10-day conflict window was authorized. The Tarsari forces deployed, landing in staggered dropships, establishing perimeter zones, anti-personnel grids, AI turrets, and reinforced bunkers. They occupied the southern hemisphere of the planet in just 6 hours. Tridrones documented the precise structure of their deployment. Everything was by the book. Then, on the 7th hour of day 1, a lone vessel entered orbit. It was small, barely more than a shuttle. No escorts. No drone support. No weapon signatures. Elias Ron stepped onto Arcanes for a loan. He wore no exosuit, carried no visible firearms, and bore no insignia beyond a single, faded earth patch on his shoulder. His boots made soft contact with the soil, and he walked forward without hesitation. In his hand, he carried only a duffel bag. In orbit, the Order officials watched with narrowed eyes. On the ground, the Tarsari watched with confusion, then amusement, then suspicion. The official conflict clock began ticking. The war, such as it was, had begun. Across the galaxy, trillions tuned in to the live feed. One man against an empire. No one expected what would come next. Would you like to move on to Section 2 next? Absolutely. Here's Section 2 of They Sent Armies, We Sent One Human, with a minimum of 700 words, continuing directly from where Section 1 ended. Section 2. Elias Ron. Elias Ron walked through the thick, reddish dust of Arcanes, as if it were just another trail. The breeze tugged at his fatigues. Somewhere, miles beyond the horizon, the Tarsari war machine stirred. Scout drones buzzed overhead, silently recording his movements. The whole galaxy was watching, waiting for the inevitable. No one man could face an army, not unless the laws of physics or sanity had been rewritten. But Elias wasn't just any man. The Galactic Order's High Council chamber was still abuzz. Political analysts debated Earth's apparent suicide by proxy. Military experts dissected Ron's vitals and body scan data, trying to understand Earth's game. But few had access to his classified files. Fewer still knew what he was. Commander Elias Ron had once been a myth even to his own people. In Earth's early interplanetary skirmishes, piracy raids, Martian rebellions, rogue AIs, he had operated behind enemy lines, often alone, often without official support. He was a product of the Indigo Doctrine, a short-lived and ethically controversial military experiment from Earth's shadow programs. Its goal was simple: create a new kind of soldier, not through brute augmentation or gene splicing, but by enhancing perception, prediction, and control. Where others saw chaos, Elias saw options. He had undergone neural layering, allowing him to process parallel streams of tactical data. Subconscious threat recognition modules. A re-engineered amygdala that suppressed fear, while still allowing instinct. Brainwave entrainment allowed him to enter optimized states of focus on command. But his most critical trait wasn't technological, it was human. He adapted. Elias had once been dropped onto a frozen moon without gear and was found alive 3 weeks later, having hijacked a local insurgent network and turned it against itself. During the Mumbai Protocol, he navigated a 3-tier urban war zone and dismantled 3 warlord coalitions in 5 days without a single civilian casualty. After that, he disappeared. Officially discharged. Unofficially shelved. The Indigo Doctrine was deemed too dangerous. Too unpredictable. The neural enhancements couldn't be removed, and Ron, increasingly aware of what he had become, had voluntarily exiled himself to Earth's outer colonies. That was until Earth called him back. Ron moved with eerie calm. He knew how this game worked. The Tarsari would not engage him directly, not at first. They would observe, probe, test. They would underestimate. That was their first mistake. He reached a small ridge and unpacked his duffel. Inside were no weapons, at least none that would be recognized as such. A roll of microfilament line, a collapsible antenna, mineral dispersers, a few components that could pass for camping gear. Elias got to work. Night fell quickly on Arcanes 4, and with it came the first blood. A Tarsari patrol, 6 units strong, was found dead at dawn. No wounds. No struggle. Their oxygen feeds had been reversed. their internal biomonitors spoofed to read as normal until they were long dead. Their helmets had been placed in a perfect circle around their sergeant's body. A small stone sat on top of his chest. Etched into it, in the Tarsari's native tongue, were 3 words. Round 1 complete. High Marshal Srajek was livid. He increased patrols. Surveillance tripled. Motion sensors were recalibrated. But it didn't matter. The next night, an entire sector's power grid went offline. Food stores were contaminated with a harmless, foul-tasting algae that triggered hallucinations in Tarsari biology. Dozens of soldiers reported seeing human figures in the shadows, moving impossibly fast, whispering things only they could hear. Elias wasn't killing the army. He was breaking it. He used their own comm systems against them. Over the next 3 days, entire squads received falsified orders, marching in circles, abandoning their posts, turning on each other in moments of panic. Some began to question their officers. Others simply deserted. The battlefield became a shifting maze of suspicion and fear. Back in orbit, the Order's observers were forced to admit that something unprecedented was unfolding. While the rules of engagement prohibited outside interference, the data feeds showed that the Tarsari's losses were increasing, without a single direct assault. No bodies bore traditional weapon marks. No energy signatures. Just slow, precise unraveling. And through it all, Elias Ron never fired a shot. He left messages. Symbols. Misdirection. He moved like a ghost through the terrain, leaving behind signs only the Tarsari could interpret. One bunker was found abandoned, its occupants tied with their own restraints, watching a looped video of their war doctrine manual, rewritten with one added line. Fear is the only enemy, and he has already won. In a rare closed-session broadcast, Earth's ambassador Amina Cho was asked by the Order to justify their choice. "We sent 1," she said, "because 1 is all it takes when your enemy believes in numbers, but you believe in mind." But this isn't war, a Vraxi senator snapped. It's manipulation. It's psychological terrorism. Cho simply nodded. War evolves. Ours just evolved faster. Down on Arkanis 4, Elias sat on the edge of a dune, sharpening a piece of alloy against stone. His eyes scanned the stars above. Somewhere, a Tarsari commander was receiving a falsified alert. Somewhere else, a junior officer was beginning to doubt the reality around him. Elias smiled faintly. Tomorrow, he would let them see him. Would you like me to continue with Section 3 next?
Certainly.
Here is Section 3 of They Sent Armies, We Sent One Human, written with a minimum of 700 words, continuing the unfolding psychological warfare and deepening the unraveling of the Tarsari forces. Hashtag Section 3. The War of One. The 5th day on Arkanis 4 dawned blood red. The Tarsari had begun to dig trenches, not out of tactical necessity, but paranoia. Their species, bred for honor-bound combat and overwhelming superiority, had never known fear like this. Their commanders issued motivational chants, barked orders through vibrating pheromonic frequencies, and rotated soldiers every 4 hours to maintain discipline. It did nothing. They had lost over 300 troops by then. Not to energy blasts or explosions, but to suffocation, sabotage, and madness. Each death was a mystery, each failure a message. Elias Ron had made it clear. He wasn't trying to win a war. He was redefining it. At 0300, a high-ranking Tarsari lieutenant known as Verksin was pulled from his command pod. The perimeter sensors showed no breach, no movement. He was found suspended upside down in the center of the command tent, unharmed, gagged with a piece of his own rank insignia. Written on the inside of the tent wall in human script and Tarsari glyphs. Command is a shadow. Try stepping into the light. By morning, several squads had mutinied, refusing to follow orders unless they saw physical proof of who was issuing them. AI relay systems began to collapse under the confusion. The Tarsari Central Comms Hub, encased in a hardened alloy dome, melted from the inside out due to a thermal feedback loop Ron had triggered by rerouting an energy conduit. How he'd gotten into the control channel, no one knew. Their engineers claimed it was impossible. Nothing was impossible anymore. Even seasoned soldiers began to question what was real. Drones captured blurry images of a human figure walking directly through sensor fields without triggering them. Some reported hearing Elias whispering in their own native tongue, recounting failures and private doubts no outsider could have known. Morale shattered not because of physical loss, but because their minds were at war with themselves. By day 6, a quarter of the Tarsari force had been medically sidelined due to psychological degradation. Another tenth had simply gone missing. Marshal Srajek convened his top commanders in a sealed bunker and authorized an agreed escalation, a last resort protocol intended for rare situations where sanctioned force was insufficient. He submitted a request to the Galactic Order for permission to deploy heavy drones and neural disruptors, even suggesting orbital, targeted warnings. The Order denied it. The rules were clear. They had sent their full force. Humanity had sent theirs. Srajek hissed in fury. This is not combat. This is desecration. He's poisoning our minds. You came here to win a war, one of his advisors said cautiously. But he came here to make us question war itself. That night, the Tarsari prepared an ambush. 40 soldiers. Baited locations. Surveillance coverage layered and redundant. Traps set. For the first time since deployment, they saw him, Elias Ron. He stepped into the clearing, walking upright, seemingly unarmed. They opened fire. Projectiles. Plasma. Net cannons. The dust cleared. He was gone. Where he had stood, only a reflective plate embedded in the ground, reflecting the night sky. A small inscription across it. You're not fighting a man. You're fighting what you believe a man can't be. The ambush team never returned. Their tracking beacons were later found scattered across a 4-mile stretch, one strapped to a severed Tarsari boot, another sealed in a canteen, broadcasting the phrase "retreat is survival." On day 7, something unprecedented happened. A surrender. A Tarsari unit of 80 soldiers marched to the designated neutral zone and placed their weapons on the ground. They requested asylum from the Galactic Order's observation crew. When questioned, their squad leader said simply, "We would rather face a tribunal than another night in his shadow." A video surfaced, recorded from one of the fallen drones, later replayed before the Galactic Order's Emergency Ethics Committee. It showed Elias walking calmly into an unguarded command post, disabling 15 soldiers without lethal force, disabling lights and broadcasting Tarsari war songs through their own loudspeakers, distorted, slowed, turned into a dirge. He left them all alive. They were weeping when the backup arrived. By day 8, Srajek ceased all offensive operations. Internal transmissions were filled with fractured messages, conflicting reports, ghost sightings. The soldiers no longer feared Elias Ron as a man. They believed he was a weaponized idea. Some began carving his name into their armor. Others spoke of him in hushed reverence, not hatred. There were rumors that he didn't sleep, that he was Earth's punishment for arrogance, that he didn't represent war, but the price of pride. When a Tarsari tactical specialist attempted suicide, convinced that Ron had invaded his thoughts, the Marshal knew the war was lost, not on paper, but in every soldier's heart. On day 9, the Marshal drafted a message to the Galactic Order. "We request immediate cessation of hostilities. Our forces cannot continue. We acknowledge Earth's claim." It wasn't surrender in the traditional sense. No treaty was signed. No medals were exchanged. But every Order official knew what it meant. A single human had unraveled an army without mass violence, without weapons of mass destruction, without killing more than a few dozen. He had made them surrender to the idea that they could be beaten by one. The Order debated whether it had just witnessed brilliance or horror. But the results were indisputable. The next morning, Elias Ron stood alone on the battlefield, staring at the rising sun over Arcani's 4. He didn't smile.
He didn't speak.
He simply turned and walked back into the wilderness, vanishing again, just as the Tarsari dropships began their retreat. Would you like me to continue with Section 4? The war is over? Absolutely. Here's section 4 of They Sent Armies, We Sent One Human, with a minimum of 700 words, concluding the story. Hashtag section 4. The war is over. The war on Armies IV officially ended with no treaties signed, no parade marches, and no victory speeches. The Tarsari Dominion withdrew their claim and their troops, each one broken not by combat, but by the undeniable presence of a single man who had defeated them without declaring a single frontal engagement. Back on Earth, Commander Elias Ron did not return to a hero's welcome.
He didn't want one.
Instead, he disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. Some said he returned to the outer colonies. Others believed he remained on Armies IV, somewhere in the uncharted wilderness, content to live in silence. The Earth government offered him honors, promotions, even a permanent seat on the Defense Council. He declined every one. But the galaxy remembered. Within weeks, news feeds across the quadrant were flooded with documentaries, simulations, and debates. Military theorists attempted to reconstruct the battle, if it could even be called that. Tarsari survivors gave haunting testimony before the order. Most spoke not of tactics or engagements, but of shadows, silence, and the overwhelming feeling that they were being hunted not by a man, but by their own hubris. One soldier, eyes hollow, described it best. He showed us what it's like to lose without knowing when the war even began.
This was more than a military affair now.
It was a philosophical crisis. For thousands of years, the Galactic Order had relied on regulated warfare, predictable, measurable, numeric. The deployment of a single operative who broke none of the official laws yet shattered the enemy force posed an existential question. What happens when one species rethinks the rules? Petitions were filed to amend Galactic Conflict Protocol 3-9A, with new clauses limiting psychological interference, information warfare, and non-conventional lone agent tactics. But these changes would take years. And the Order, for all its bureaucracy, could not erase what had been done. Humanity, once dismissed as primitive, was now something else. Unpredictable. Earth's ambassador, Amina Cho, received quiet but uneasy praise from several council members. In closed quarters, they admitted they had misjudged Earth's restraint as weakness. "The galaxy may be ancient," she said in one interview, "but age does not equal wisdom. Sometimes, it takes the youngest voice to ask the question no one else dares. What if we don't fight the way you expect us to?" She never confirmed how Elias Ron was chosen. Most assumed he volunteered. Others suspected the decision was made long before Armies IV was even contested, that Earth had kept him in reserve, not for war, but for a message. A message that the next era of conflict would not be about numbers, but narratives. That no matter how many fleets a species could build, they were vulnerable if they could be made to doubt. And humans, imperfect, emotional, chaotic humans, had mastered the art of shaping perception. Meanwhile, among the Tarsari, a cultural reckoning began. Some veterans refused to speak of Armies IV. Others left military service entirely. A few, those who had seen Elias face to face, entered religious orders, treating him as a mythic figure. Not an enemy, but an omen. The Tarsari Council debated purging all records of the event. But too many already knew. Their children asked questions now. About fear. About arrogance. About failure. A species that once defined strength solely through force now grappled with a new paradigm, that the greatest warrior they had ever faced had never needed an army at all.
For Elias Ron, none of that mattered.
He had never intended to be a legend. He had only accepted the mission because he believed no one else should be asked to do what he could do alone. And even then, it haunted him. He hadn't won a war. He had dismantled souls. Even when acting under the strict codes of engagement, Elias knew what he had done was dangerous, not just to the enemy, but to himself. He had stared into the heart of alien minds and broken them with nothing but suggestion, confusion, and fear. It was efficient. It was effective. But it wasn't clean. That was the burden of being who he was. He often wandered into settlements under different names, fixing generators, teaching survival tactics, speaking little. Those who recognized him didn't dare approach. Some feared him. Others revered him. But none truly understood him. Perhaps no one ever would. Years later, in a military academy on Earth, a cadet asked their instructor during a lecture, "Why did we only send one human?" The instructor paused, then answered, "Because one was enough." The phrase became a proverb, a cautionary tale, and eventually, an inscription carved into a memorial on Arkanis 4, a silent monument standing on the edge of the original battlefield. No flags flew there. No names were listed. Just a single figure carved into dark obsidian, facing away toward the horizon. At the base, etched into the stone, "They sent armies. We sent one human."
End.
Would you like me to format this as a complete document or help you turn it into a downloadable file?